Welcome to the Open Loop podcast. It's a podcast exploring the people, companies, and ideas shaping the future of neurotechnology. I'm Chay Carter, the founder of Carter Sciences, Recce Neuro, and the Neurotech newsletter. In each episode, I sit down with founders, operators, researchers, investors, and leaders building the edge of neuroscience, neurotechnology, and healthcare. We'll have honest conversations about people's journeys into the neurotech industry, what they're currently building, how it's going, the realities, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what the future holds for the neurotech industry in general.
In this episode, I sat down with Dan Rizzuto, President and CTO of Nia Therapeutics. Dan has been in the BCI world for over 2 decades, and Nia is doing something genuinely different, a closed-loop device that senses brain activity and delivers stimulation to help patients hold on to their memories. We got into the evolution of the field, how cognitive prosthetics differ from the motor BCI work most people know, and why the patients at the center of all of this are the reason the whole thing matters. Welcome to the podcast. We're here today with Dan from Nia Therapeutics. Dan, I would love you to tell your story about what brought you to Nia and your background and so forth in a neuroscience space.
Absolutely, Chay. Thank you for having me. So, Dan Rizzuto, I'm the president and CTO of Nia Therapeutics, and I founded this company along with my co-founder, Mike Kahana, to develop new cognitive prosthetics and to help patients with memory loss who are currently underserved. I'm a PhD in neuroscience by training, a neuroscientist by training, and I did postdoctoral work in brain-machine interfaces. I've managed various clinical trial indications in neuromodulation, and Nia Therapeutics brought all of those threads together in one incredible project that has the potential to truly make groundbreaking progress towards treating memory loss.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot happening, I feel like, at the moment in the memory disorder space, and maybe memory enhancement might be something we can talk about further down the line. But tell us a little bit about the technology and what that looks like.
Yeah, so Nia is developing a what's called a closed-loop neurostimulation system. It's an implantable device that senses brain activity while patients are going about their day. And when it detects periods of poor cognitive performance, it delivers a very gentle electrical stimulation to nudge the brain back into a state of good cognitive performance. This technology sounds like science fiction, but it's actually based on decades of research from my co-founder's lab at the University of Pennsylvania and dozens of publications that have demonstrated how you can actually read out cognitive states from the brain while patients are performing memory tasks or even just going about their day.
I love that. I mean, I think there's a lot of conversations in the neurotech space sound very sci-fi, but are based on decades of research in the space. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you've been in the BCI space for over 20 years now, right? I mean, what drew you into that space? And I mean, I guess the real question is, what does it look like now compared to what it looked like 20 plus years ago?
Yeah. Oh, how have things changed? It's been incredible just to watch the evolution of the field. You know, I started doing BCI development and research at California Institute of Technology back in the early 2000s, and at that time there were no BCI startups. There was one, Cyberkinetics, that was at the very forefront of developing BCIs for motor indications. That was it. That was the whole field of BCI, and there were very few neurotech startups at all, even more broadly surveying the space. And now we have, multiple closed-loop neuromodulation systems. Every company is touting AI-driven personalization of their therapies. We have now, with Nia's recent breakthrough device designation, we have actual FDA pathways for cognitive prosthetics. So the field went from like, can we move a cursor in a few patients to can we restore memory in potentially millions of patients. So it was an incredible journey. And, the explosion of companies that you see in the neurotech space now, it's really been breathtaking to watch and an incredible journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds amazing, right? So much BCI work at the moment is focused on motor prosthesis, as you mentioned, trying to control a mouse and restore various different functions. But yours is obviously about the cognitive side of it. I mean, what was that decision like there to move into the cognitive BCI space as opposed to the motor prosthetic side?
Yeah, I wish that it was, that I could say it was a more planned, outcome. But I did my doctoral work at Brandeis in human memory and recording the brain signals that underlie human memory and interpreting those and understanding how the brain supports human memory. And then I trained at Caltech in motor BCI. How does the brain indicate its intention to drive a cursor, to move? And, I started moving from basic research into applied research. And then I was looking around towards the end of my postdoc and thinking, what do I do now? Because there aren't 10 different BCI companies that are developing at that time. And I ended up at North Star Neuroscience in Seattle, doing clinical neuromodulation for major depression. We were stimulating dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to treat patients with depression. And that's where I really caught the neurotech bug, right? We had patients who were severely depressed for years and years, like the type of patient who couldn't get out of the bed in the morning. And we saw that they went into remission. Some of those patients actually went into remission after receiving stimulation. And that's where I said, this is where I need to play to be able to help develop new therapies for patients. And then in 2014, I got a call from my doctoral advisor, Mike Kahana, who's now my co-founder. And he said, Dan, I just got $20 million from DARPA to do the project we've always dreamed about, which is using brain stimulation to modulate memory. Before this, we had been using brain recordings to understand human memory, but we didn't have the resources to do a really intensive survey of brain stimulation. So that was, that was a pivotal moment. I moved from Seattle to Philadelphia to join him at Penn. Together, we led this DARPA RAM Restoring Active Memory project that allowed us to record and stimulate from more than 400 patients who had implanted electrodes for part of their epilepsy workup. And that's where we built the foundational technology for closed loop neurostimulation to treat memory loss. And it was these steps of training in memory, training in BCI, doing clinical neuromodulation, and then putting it all together and to develop this groundbreaking technology for treating memory loss that ultimately resulted in the founding of Nia Therapeutics.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like the neurotech market has sort of branched into lots of different directions over the years. Like the original neuromodulation space, the implantable device, deep brain stimulation, vagus nerve, spinal cord stimulation, very
Yeah.
much about focusing certain types of nerves, and peripheral nerve stimulation now seems to be the future trend, I think, in that type of market. But what I think was also happening at the same time was that signal decoding space, signal processing, which has turned into BCIs to some degree. And it sounds like what you've got is a combination of the two. It's a
Hmm.
stimulator and it's a brain reader, which is probably the two hottest topics right now. And I think obviously BCIs, there's the implantable market. There's also a wearable space developing there too, focused around EEG technology and our ability now to make sense of that noise using machine learning techniques. But I think also the neurostimulation market is getting more and more fascinated too, with some really, really exciting FDA news, yours included, but some of the neurostimulators for depression, which you alluded to you were working on previously as well.
Hmm.
How would you describe your device now, like in that context? Is it a wearable and an implantable? Is it fully implantable? How does it work from that perspective? A real deep dive into it.
Sure. So it includes both wearable and implantable components. The implant component, which is mounted in the skull. It senses brain activity and decodes that brain activity using machine learning algorithms. And like I mentioned before, when it detects periods of poor cognitive performance, it can gently stimulate the brain to rescue that brain activity and rescue memory function and improve human memory. Our device also includes a wearable earpiece, much like a cochlear implant sound processor. If you've ever seen somebody walking around with an earpiece and a little coil on their head, that's a cochlear implant that restores sound processing and hearing to patients with hearing loss. And we've taken a page from the cochlear implant playbook. We've developed an earpiece that has the battery, so it provides power wirelessly to the implant, and it also acts as a communication hub, so we can synchronize the neural recordings from the device up to the cloud. And the cloud is really what crunches the data, builds that personalized therapy for each patient, which is then, once that therapy is built, it's then embedded in the device and it operates autonomously. So it includes both implant, wearable earpiece, and a cloud-based software component that autonomously builds the therapy under physician oversight, of course. So yeah, it's a mix of form factors, and we're excited to bring this new therapy to the clinic and ultimately to market.
But yeah, it's funny you mentioned the cochlear implant. There's lots of like his hearing aid devices. People I speak to are now calling themselves the first BCIs that ever existed, which is true, right?
Hmm.
It's an interesting space. I feel like the BCI acronym is almost a bit like AI, where in neurotech everyone wants to jump on that bandwagon to some degree and be like, "Oh, I'm a
Yep,
BCI company now." But the reality
that's
is,
right.
if you're reading brain signals and you're converting them into a computer interface, then I think you're well within your right to do that. It sounds like you guys are on the forefront of that too. And you mentioned something interesting there too about improving memory as well as not just restoring
Mm,
the cognitive enhancement space is interesting, isn't it? Because then it kind of
yeah.
bleeds into a direct to consumer conversation of, is this the future of neurotech? Well, what are your thoughts on that space? And is that something that you guys have envisioned from a business plan about people who want to improve their memory, who maybe don't have memory disorders?
There's certainly going to be people who want to do that, right? So there's demand there.
Yeah.
However, at this stage of the game, these devices are only really suitable for patients who have a serious debilitating disorder. In the future, as the risk profile changes, as the risk profile comes down, think about a future where the risk profile of a neurotechnology is similar to rhinoplasty or a nose job, right? People get these all the time to improve their physical appearance. It strikes me that eventually, again, not today, not 5 years from now, but eventually we will have devices that will have a similar side effect profile as a rhinoplasty procedure. And so that's the real game changer. And you can unlock quote unquote healthy aging or healthy individuals. But for now, we're firmly focused on medical indications, patients who have debilitating disorders, and we think we can make really groundbreaking changes to their quality of life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's certainly a conversation, isn't it, within the neurotech space where people get ahead of themselves, maybe. And then there are some devices which are aimed purely at cognitive enhancement, and that's absolutely fine. But I think there's obviously a huge amount of clinical work that needs to be done still until it's readily accessible, let alone the regulatory work. And you mentioned obviously your breakthrough designation. I'd love to know a little bit more about the process there for you. What are the next steps for you guys on the regulatory and clinical side?
Yeah, so just to level set here, this is not an FDA approval. It's really a fast lane to clinical development. And that's why we're excited about this. The FDA has essentially indicated that there's an unmet need, that these patients with memory loss due to traumatic brain injury, and that's the indication that we received breakthrough device designation for, TBI, TBI-related memory loss, as it's known. The FDA has indicated that that's an unmet need with no good alternatives. And they've committed to a more interactive review, no more 90-day turnarounds for asking the FDA a question, for instance. We get a direct line to the review team, and that changes everything for a small company. It's a breakthrough, right? There wasn't a regulatory category for this type of a device before. We're the first company developing a cognitive prosthetic that has received this type of designation. And so, what's next for Nia? We're currently working towards what's called an IDE, investigational device exemption. That's coming down the pike, and that will allow us to run our first in human early feasibility study in a small cohort of patients with TBI-related memory loss, and we're preparing for that now. And, I think it's a great signal for neurotech in general. They're taking cognitive BCIs seriously as a therapeutic pathway, and, that's great news.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of sort of companies on the horizon there as well, but a lot of the battles that people are facing, I know certainly over the last few years, there's been a number of different issues around fundraising, and obviously due to interest rates and tariffs and so forth, a number of different things that have complicated the fundraising
Yeah.
climate. Where are you guys in the fundraising process? What does it look like for you, and what do you think the future holds for Nia right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're just getting started with our, undertaking our Series A process. So looking forward to raising an A to undertake that first clinical trial. And it's always challenging to fundraise. There's no, it's rarely easy, but we believe that we have an incredible, groundbreaking product, and we're confident that we're going to be able to bring this to patients.
Fantastic. I mean, looking at that cognitive BCI market, then what are the sort of things that excite you right now? There's obviously lots of similar technologies, and this is what I like about Neurotech in particular, is that there's some really, really exciting stuff being built. A lot of it with the same sort of principles and ideas around reading or signal decoding and stimulation. Lots of different indications being covered as well, even in the cognitive side, just purely on that. What are the sort of things that are exciting you in the neurotech space right now?
I think the fact that there's now multiple BCI companies conducting clinical trials for motor BCI, that's right. That's incredible. It shows that the field is maturing. Investors are ready to underwrite the risk, the clinical risk of these BCI technologies, and it's a great time to be in the neurotech space. I think that's the bellwether event. Multiple companies all pursuing motor BCI. It's what an exciting time.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I have to like sort of taper people's expectations a lot of time too, because I think you see these headlines, they're quite fantastical and sci-fi ish in their, the fact that we can decode thoughts well, signals, essentially, that's where it all kind of started, is really incredible. And I think the technology is sort of exponentially growing and improving and expanding at all given times. But I also have to remind people that there's not that many patients really who are using these full time. I think Neuralink have 21 patients. I think
Hmm.
Precision have quite a few, but with temporary implants. There's a lot of hype, and then there's also a lot of like reality checking going on about like, hey, like let's slow it
Right.
down a little bit. I mean, there's obviously some big checks being written too, and I think that kind of helps get people excited when you see the hundreds of millions. Plus, you see like the billionaire class coming in now, the Sam Altmans and whatnot, investing in neurotech companies, which again really exciting. Yeah, what do you think that sort of means for the industry? Do you think it's a positive thing? I think the Elon Musk effect is obviously a big part of it too. What are your thoughts on that from like a theoretical perspective?
Yeah. So, it's rising tide floats all boats here, right? And so there's been a massive increase in the attention and the funding of Neurotech. Of course, that results also in a massive increase in expectations, right? And this is where we're really in the early innings of this game. While there has been a Cambrian explosion of technologies, not all the technologies are going to work out. But this is, it's an incredible time. It's very difficult to predict who the winners are going to be, and it's very exciting just to be part of the race. I couldn't ask for a better place or time to be building right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's important to remember that like the commercial landscape is still a long way off. I think despite the fact that we see this big money, but a lot of that money is going into clinical trials and regulatory processes, which is exactly where it should be going.
Yep.
And it
Yep.
fills me with confidence for the future of the market that we're not just rushing through with all this money and trying to get it to consumers as quickly as possible. This is very much trying to solve issues with a patient population that need it dearly and have had no other options prior to that too. So
Hmm.
it's a really, really exciting time to see how that is going to pan out. I track about four to 500 different neurotech companies, and you have to remind yourself that a large percentage of those won't make it. Like, what percentage of startups actually make it?
Yeah.
And it's a shame. I think, maybe it might be slightly different within a neurotech landscape because it's in the medical sector. There's got to be some acquisitions that happen along the way. We've seen Boston Scientific snap up
Hmm.
quite a few people over the last few years. And obviously, there's a lot of attention coming into it now, which means that I think the awareness and the adoption of neurotechnology will probably be a lot broader. But what are the things in neurotech outside of the BCI space that interest you? Because I think we discussed at the beginning, right? There's a neuromod, the neurostim space. There's obviously the BCI stuff. There's the wearable market. There's a lot of neuroimaging stuff happening. There was a Connect Home Health raised some money recently. That's a really exciting market. Like our just understanding of the brain, I think, is changing a lot, but it's not all brain focused too. If you could zoom out and look at the neurotech market as a whole, what excites you and what do you think is interesting?
Yeah, I think the new modalities, right? Merge Labs coming out, right? The Sam Altman backed company coming out with focused ultrasound. You've got companies that are doing endovascular approaches for both recording and stimulation. Just, the explosion of new modalities that are being explored that's truly exciting. You're seeing this real translation from academia to industry, and let a thousand flowers bloom, right? Truly, it's wonderful. Not everything is going to work out, but there will be some real winners in the space, and I'm excited just to see the new modalities that are emerging.
Indeed, yeah. It's like we mentioned earlier as well around the technologies that have sort of always existed and being used for different things, like the ultrasound space now being focused ultrasound. There's fMRI stuff happening too. There's advancements in the EEG space. I think it's a lot of it comes down to form factor, the wearable market, the EEG wearable, direct to consumer market is interesting. Some big money being raised there. I've said this before and I'll say it again that the person who can crack the form factor for the wearable EEG direct to consumer or a ring for the brain type device is going to be a very, very successful individual. And I think devices like yours are all part of that because I think there's going to be some merging of the wearable and the BCI space at some point. Like form factor, hardware, obviously the software will continue to improve as well. And the least invasive BCI with the best signal reading ability will really really change the world. And I feel like we're just getting started, even though it's been around for 20 years. You know better than most that the advancements we've seen, I think, over the last few years and the ability to get it in front of patients is just really really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes time to optimize the form factor. The first thing you have to do is get the efficacy in place, right? If you've got the best form factor in the world, but it doesn't have efficacy, then what do you have really,
Yeah.
right? And this is the challenge with I'd say the direct to consumer market, and especially the direct to consumer cognitive enhancement market. It's booming, but it's based on quicksand, right? There's no real scientific basis. They point to, these TDCS companies point to hundreds of TDS studies that have been done in the academic literature, but none of their own studies actually supporting the efficacy of their device. So, the appetite for these types of devices is real. It reflects a genuine unmet need in the market, but it makes it harder for patients who have real neurological conditions to find the treatments that are actually validated and will actually help them. Nia is sitting on, we're a class 3 medical device. We're going to be rigorously evaluated by the FDA based on our data. And so, our devices could eventually impact the direct to consumer space. We're going to have incredible learnings from having a BCI technology that can store, data and in a readily accessible format. But that's going to take time to be able to, extract those learnings and develop new novel therapies that have never been thought of before. But it really starts with having an efficacious therapy. And that's what Nia is focused on building now, getting that evidence and building, accreting over time to build a lasting therapy.
That's it. And I think the more users, the more data, and obviously it comes into a conversation around brain data and neuroethics, and that's maybe a conversation for a different day. I think as we get more and more devices recording brain data and decoding different types of data,
an important topic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're still learning a lot about that. And I think as we get more and more devices out there, it'll become a common conversation as opposed to a sort of a policy-driven conversation, which it is right now. But yeah, I think you guys are going to be at the forefront of that with obviously so many potential usages for your device. So yeah, I really, really appreciate your time today, Dan. It's been really great to learn about it. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
Just bringing it back to the patients, this is the thing that keeps all of us going here at Nia. Memory loss is truly devastating to these patients. And right now, they have no real options. So we feel lucky to be doing this work. We're excited about what's coming. And I think the next few years, both for Nia and for Neurotech writ large, are going to matter a lot more than people realize. So thank you for bringing a spotlight to the field and to Nia, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Dan. It's been great to sit down and chat. And yeah, looking forward to seeing how you guys get on.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. This podcast is brought to you by Carter Sciences, the headhunting practice that covers not only headhunting, but also fractional talent work for startups who need help, but don't want to spend those big recruitment fees, wanting to work on a more hourly basis with companies, and also career coaching for neurotech professionals. The goal is to provide cost-effective solutions across all neurotech hiring needs.